Okay, now
All
I am
right.
recording.
All right.
So beware that everything you say is gonna be like ting tong ting gong.
Yes. Well, we want to welcome our third egg,
Verdict.
Francis.
Francis.
Right?
Hi, this is Francis.
Yes.
Oh, I just realized that we actually never introduced ourselves, Kevin. Out of
We
the
never
whole
did.
4 hour, we never did that.
We never did. Okay.
we,
Well,
well,
here
we
we
didn't
go.
have that. Yeah, so
Here we
I'm Anson.
go. So it's like
Thanks
a
for
belated
Francis.
introduction.
Yeah, it's like, but since Francis did it, so I'm Anson.
I'm Kevin,
Yeah,
and he's Francis. So
I'm
yes.
Francis.
Hey,
yes.
there you go.
So
Yeah,
so
but I
that
guess
completes the three eggs.
that's how
Yeah.
casual it was for last week.
Yeah.
Well, okay, because it was the whole conversation. It was flowing. That's what I like about it. Like, and I think Alex fall in love with it too. Other than the fact that she complained about some of the topics she won't be interested, but overall, the whole overall conversation was actually flowing quite well. So I think like back to the question that you asked me like just in half an hour ago, I think I really like this whole format, not just for the not just for the ease of it, which is obviously the biggest appeal, but also the natural, how natural and authentic it feels, and with the other, yeah. So I think like I would love to continue it this way. I mean, Cantonese obviously in the future, if there are people that look forward to it, I do think we would need to be a brand for now. But
Sure.
anyway,
Yeah.
so Francis was talking about connecting the dots and whether we should design whether we should design those dots or be more. I suppose be more purposeful in increasing those dots in meanings like experience and skill sets, right? And whether we should be intentional or we should just, for me, I feel like I'm just gonna interject a bit before giving back to Francis. And for me, I would feel like I am more about letting it letting the dot grow. It sounds a bit dirty for some reason. It sounds like mushroom or something like that. But like for me, I feel like I'm more personally letting the dot grow because I remember like the time when I was sort of purposefully growing my skill set towards IBM and getting the work experience, communication skills, the diplomas, and this and that, and 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 I did it at the end, and it was useful. Definitely, if you want to build towards something, is most likely success rate is going to go up. So the usefulness of it is definitely there, right? But what I found out later is that because I sort of artificially built those points, that I realized I didn't really enjoy most of the notes. For example, my consulting skills. I mean, yes, I still use them now. I'm not saying it's useless, but uh, I didn't really enjoy the consulting that I used to do, in the sense that I don't like the businessy part of things. That's all the reason why I leave. And what I would say is that because I didn't allow myself to grow naturally, which for me, natural is randomly in every direction, very opposite to what I like, how I like to talk. I like to grow in a very random way. I I would do boxing today, and then I would learn how to edit video the other day because it's fun, right? So, and it would, I don't know where it will lead at all, but at the very least, when I'm growing those thoughts, it feels more interesting for me, and therefore that's why I would be the one who advocate for like just having no structure and letting it be random. But I would love to hear like what we want to say, Francis, like because we sort of like stop in the middle for that.
Yeah, before I add, like Kevin, do you have any thoughts to talk?
After you. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I can resonate with Anson about like the unstructured way of growing, right? Which is quite free, I guess. And then it also allows us to basically sometimes be in the flow because when we are in the flow, we want to continue that, right? Rather than, oh, we have to be limited by the structure because now let's say look at the timetable, I have to do something else. So I guess there are pros and cons for a more structured way to boost productivity, or rather it's a more unstructured way to engage in creativity or something else? I guess different purpose would fit different way of doing things. And then back to the point about in being intentional in our life, or being going with the flow, or letting events come to us, right? So I once talked about that with my friend, and he told me this example or analogy about a high-speed train versus a normal train. So his point was, if you see your life as uh, a train journey from point A, one station, to point B, another station. So if you have a particular goal that you want to achieve, so probably you want to take the high speed well, right? A bullet train where it has fewer stops and get you there to the destination faster so that you achieve your goal faster, right? And then I asked him, okay, so what about those normal train where you get to stop at more station, and chances are you get off the train and look at the like small towns or other less famous destination, right? So then he told me, okay, so if you do that, you're not jumping on the high speed well. It means that you're stopping at smaller stops, and you got off the train to look around the scene over there. It means that the overall time will increase because you're not getting to the destination faster. But then you also, as a result, get to look at other scenery, other destination in the journey, right? So long story short, in the end, he basically concluded that if you have a clear destination, you want to get there as fast as possible, then probably you should get on the high speed rail and be deliberate, and knowing that you have to sacrifice a lot of small stops in between because you don't get the time, you don't get to look around because you have to get to the destination as fast as possible. But if you basically appreciate the journey, appreciate the process, then you may want to get on board of a normal train and then take the time, look at the scenery elsewhere, and then eventually you'll get to a destination eventually. But then I also like went back home and start thinking, well, that is the assumption that you know you are going to reach the destination, right? But then in real life, is it that clear cut that you know you have a goal and you will end up eventually get there? Because on high speed rail, you still get to the destination. On a normal train, you also get to the destination, right? But then in real life, is it similar that if you take a lot of time, do a lot of other things, will you eventually get to the goal? The same way you sacrifice everything for that. So just my take for that.
Right. Um,
So, like the
I
oh
sorry. Do you want to?
yeah, you
go,
can go
Anson?
first. You can go first. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was when this topic first came up, uh, I I thought about two words, right? Is it life by default or life by design? You know, default is letting things happen to you, and design is making things happen for you. But actually, in fact, in life, we're always swimming in between events that either we make happen or that happen to us. And if you look at the essence of what are the things that we make happen and what do we need to do to make those happen, in the simplest form is we're making choices. We're making a deliberate choice. Whether we know it or not is our choice. Okay. And the things that happen to us, to some extent, are consequence of the choices we make. So they're kind of both sides of the same coin. It's not that there is some random set of events always. There are some. So externalities, things that we have no direct connection with, like the pandemic, does it affect us? Of course it does. It affects everybody. There are those events that are a little bit more distant and they're external to us, in which we have no control, with very little ability to predict, for example, versus those things that, as a result of our own choices and action, becomes a consequence of what we do. Okay, and so I just want to lay it out that there are these type of events. So when we think about our life, it's not a simple matter of let me set up a goal, do this, and I'll get there, because there are those things that we don't control, we can't predict. They come in, and maybe they make us veer off course sometimes. And then we start questioning, oh, is it me? Is it my design? It may not be, right? Maybe what you do is perfectly good. It's just that there are forces which we cannot control. And those come to us, and we just have to deal with them. And I say this a lot of times, that I don't think life is like a linear trajectory. If you do everything right, that is like, a 45-degree upward straight line slope from now until, you die, or the peak of your life, whatever that is. I think life is more like a stock market, and it goes up and down, up and down. And if the general trend is up, I think you're winning. You should be pretty, happy about that. You can't just expect, a stock to just always go up and never a downtime. And I guess once you accepted the possibility of that swing, the up and down swing, then you look at these swings a little bit differently. They're no longer nasty surprises, things that should not have happened. You think that, well, okay, well, what have I done? Have I done all that I could, and it still didn't work? And if that's the case, then hey, maybe I just got to accept something that I may not agree with, right? So there are things in our lives that happens that we have no control over, and you might disagree with it, but you have no control over it. So how do you make peace with those kind of things? And if you don't make peace, how does that impact your emotions, and therefore your motivations, your rationality? All those things actually becomes important to you making your next decision, which is all part of designing your life, if we think about in that context, right? It's a series of choices that we make, and the ultimate consequences, and you're the one taking responsibility for your set of consequences. So I would say, I think generally speaking, we're like a boat, right? And we set sail on the sea. We are the captain of the boat. So what is one of the major mission if you're a captain and you're at sea? Well, I would say you need to figure out where you are and roughly which direction you're heading as a primary brief, so that you're roughly heading the right direction, right? Whether the speed is of this and that, okay, well, maybe the weather is not completely in your control, so you do the best you can. But at least if you keep heading that way, when you steer your boat that way, then there is a better likelihood that you're going to reach somewhere close to your ultimate destination. But then you ask me, well, Kevin, how do I know which direction is right? I just started, right? I don't, So I said, well, look to the compass. I don't have a compass. What is a compass? Okay, well, this is the part where it gets interesting. Maybe before you set sail, you need to take a sailing course and talk to some old sailor who sailed before, and ask them, what is a compass? Okay, well, let me show you what a compass is. Right? Or who are those people? Well, anyone who's lived a few more years than you and might have done a few more things in life and learned somewhere, somehow, these things that I've done in the past. And I don't mean necessarily to talk to an older person per se. You can look at history. You can learn from people's biography. You can look at people's interview and learn from them, right? The beautiful thing about today's technology is, online materials are so abundant, and you can talk to any time to someone who's dead years ago, and he will still be alive digitally, immortal, talking to you one way, right? And gives you all the wisdom that you need. So I think there is a uh, a very useful investment in which anyone can make is about if you want to figure out how to figure out your direction, then maybe take some references from people who inspired you or who you aspire to become, and maybe learn a little bit about their life, how they become who they are. And from there, extract some of the lessons they've learned, and maybe we can take some reference from there to guide how we ought to be in the way we behave, the way we think, the way we maintain our relationships, right? So on and so forth. So I know it's kind of a bit of a mishmash, but that would be the way I would think about that topic, because it's quite a broad, deep topic, which I love, but I don't want to, get in too deep. But I just want to show you some of my thoughts. Yeah.
There's just a little bit sidetrack. It does feels a little bit like we're going back to like yeah, the DSC exam where like we're waiting for Yahoo Tong Hao to speaking. Well, no, but like I think I was just thinking like the point Kevin's point and also Francis' point on like the sort of like the train state the train analogy, right? So it's like maybe like Francis say, like maybe it's not as straightforward as we start somewhere and we have a destination, but it's life at the end of the day is a bunch of branches that we make a lot of decision on whether to change the station or not, and that sort of decision sort of you never really know what decision comes to you. So in a sense, you're on a train that you don't know what lines there are, and it sort of like forces you to stop and go off. And I was like, okay, well, now you have a left track and right track. And when you have to make those decisions, you can say, well, do I want to make a decision to do something because I have something in mind, I have a destination that I want to go to, or do I want to make a decision to not make a decision and just let roll the dice and see which line I want to go on, right? And so I think it's sort of I'm very much like what Kevin talked about before, which is the fact that if you the fact that you choose to not make a decision, or the fact that you choose to make a random decision, or really is also a decision in life. So at the end of the day, you're still making a choice, but it's just the principle of the choice that makes a difference, I suppose. So maybe what I describe as a random lifestyle and what Francis described as a guided lifestyle or purposefully designing a life is not that dissimilar, in a sense that we are still making choices based on our preferences or knowledge at the moment, right? And and then going back to what Kevin said and learning from the history, it's actually one of the questions I want to ask. Is wondering what you think. So, because there's so many different philosophy and ideology and success story really out there, and there's so much to learn from. And I do agree that we should read and learn and try to extract the part that you feels like would be suitable for you. I think feeling being the key word here. But then there is also an argument to be made where other people's success usually do not translate to your success, in the sense that because they're a different person, the same action might not translate to the same result just because you do the same thing. So then how do you choose what to learn then? You know what I'm saying? Like you have, like you say, an array of internet, and just as an additional question before I pass the mic, right? After like, because there's so many information internet on the internet and so many ways to learn, and let's assume that we already possess the ability to sniff out what's good knowledge and bad knowledge, and good and bad being your own judgment, obviously. But there's still going to be a lot of good knowledge, right? how do you not get overwhelmed by it, and just sort of create this mismatch of um road. So imagine like now it's not a train track, but it's just literally now you're in the station where it's 100 different track in front of you. How do you make that choice? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I will pass the mic, and feel free throw the ball. Feel free to pick it up.
Francis, you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. So this is actually one of the topics that Francis and I talked about. The So if you recount the history of internet, going back 25 years ago, when we had nothing, and then we have the first web page, and then we have the first of something, and then slowly we build up. There was a time where the amount of information available on the internet and the people who seek them was roughly balanced in terms of what I want to get out of there. There is enough, but not too much. Okay. But now, the proliferation of people like us who put their podcasts out there, where previously we were just three dudes just talking in our own little room, are contributing to a sea of information out there. And this requires an extra dimension of what I would call curating. Okay. So you look at a bunch of photographs, but there's 1,000 of them. Not every single one is worthy of being, appreciated and looked at. So we would look at those that essentially carries enough substance. And so someone needs to curate it. Okay. There is no such thing on the internet or YouTube. Well, the thing that gets closest to it would be the YouTube algorithm. That learns your preferences and said, oh, you like podcasts or you like long form interviews. Okay, I'm going to give you more of that. Okay, there's 5 hours. You like it? Okay, I'm going to give you another one. So, and that's good. And I'm very thankful for it, right? But they don't really curate quality per se. They curate topics, they curate duration, they're learning many things, right? And they're always improving. So when you talk about there's so many out there, what do I do with it? So when I listen to this, what do I take out of it? And how do I know this is going to be helpful for me? To that, I would say I wouldn't look at an event verbatim and take it on the surface as it is and try to apply to me, but I would try to understand the essence behind it. So for Edison, for Tesla, for Elon Musk, what is it that drive them? What are the attitudes and mindset that makes them decide what they decide? What were they thinking about? What were they weighing up? What were they thinking when they were weighing up? Right? So what I'm trying to understand is their decision-making process and how they would evaluate their own decisions to be suitable or not suitable at that point in time. Okay, and it's a very complicated process because times are different, societies are different, culture is different, and all the things are different. So, and that's what makes it interesting. There is no one surefire formula that would give you the right results all the time, anytime. It's something that you need to adapt. And I think this is a very important abstract from nature. And I think I speak about this more than once. It's not the strongest nor the smartest species that survive. It's the one that adapts the best to the current environment that they need to navigate in order to survive. And when you think about adaptation, it means your willingness and ability to change and match what the environment needs in order for you to navigate through it in a harmonious way. So you're not going up against certain things, creating friction, creating your own blockage, hurdles for yourself. And so let's say for me, and I look at interviews, I look at history, I once heard Yuval Harari, the guy who wrote *Sapien* and a bunch of other books, he talks about history. He said, history is not really a study of events like most people think. History is also, he said, also a study of behavior. And once I heard that, I thought, wow, I never took that angle on history. But ever since I took that angle on history, the history is a completely different animal to me now. It is so relevant to everything that we do because, we as a human being and our way of making sense of survival and and prosperity hasn't really changed that much from that many years ago. It's still talking about, okay, well, your basic needs, a community, a culture, enough food, enough water, shelter. And then once you get above that, then you start to look at other things that are beyond the needs. So you go up the Maslow ladder, right? Pretty much in each of the civilization. And you can see that every time you get satisfied materially in your daily lives, you start to look for spiritual satisfaction, emotional satisfaction, psychological satisfaction, because the material life has been looked after and it's no longer a threat and it's no longer that good. You've gotten used to it. We're taking it for granted. We switch the light and it's boom. Oh, that's light. We open a tap. Oh, that's water. Oh, that's hot water. We don't think about it. Our life is so much well looked after by a whole lot of people who makes it happen for us. We forgot that once upon a time, we have to grow our own food, fetch our own water. So with all of those out of our mind, we now think that something else is more important. Okay? All of these formless stuff. Okay? And that is a sign of a different layer, a different dimension of civilization. So it's not good or bad. We're just, moving to a different dimension. So then in this dimension, how should we extract historical lessons to help us navigate here? And I would say focus on the behavior. Focus on the change of behaviors. Focus on how people choose to behave. Why did they do that? And then you apply those principles and try to make sense of today's world. Does it still apply? You look at someone else's behavior and say, okay, what kind of context is around that piece of behavior? Oh, okay, I think I've seen that before. So, once you start establishing that, history takes on a whole new meaning. It's actually quite dynamic. It's not dead, right? Everything that is in history provides some sort of an implied behavioral blueprint for potential future behavior if you are able to detect similar circumstances emerging around it. So, so that's maybe a little bit abstract, but I hope that wasn't too heavy. But that's how I would think about what you just said, Anson.
There's no topic too heavy, remember?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, but Francis, you want to say something before I come in? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we are being too polite here. Anyway, um, I think I was wondering because just to, because I'm actually quite curious of what you just said, Kevin. So I'm just going to ask some follow-up question, okay? Which is, so I would think that when we interpret history, right, we interpret it through our own lenses and our own circumstances create that lenses. So me and Alex would have a different lenses because we have different upbringing. So what I'm trying to say is that how we see things are ultimately determined by our pre-built value and everything, right? And because of that, when we use our lens, we extract the lessons or behavior in your sense from a history lesson. We often sort of would see it from our own lens, and for that you create, I would assume, a bias, right? Because of essentially you are seeing things through a lens that are not completely holistic, which I think is impossible for one human to do. Then how do you make sure that that lesson is, when you extract it, is it okay to have a bias? In the sense that if I can imagine a scenario where if I am learning, because when I did that myself, right? When I am reading, let's say, the biography by Elon Musk or Nietzsche, when I'm trying to understand what nihilism is, I sort of found myself extracting the part I agree with and reinforcing what I already agree with it. And what it ended up is that I am sort of I self-create an echo chamber that constantly reinforce a point of view until someone comes in and interrupt me. So for example, Kevin, and for example, Alex, for example, Francis, right? That tells me, okay, actually, maybe that is a very biased view of seeing things. And so, but is there a way for you to prevent that from happening? Because for me, it's quite worrying, right? I always feel like if you are just staying on, if you're doing it alone, you know, and you create this strong personal view that is unchallenged and unfortunately biased because of our inability to be holistic to begin with, wouldn't you build a very strong and extreme opinion at the end, or extreme lifestyle, or at least even value at the end, that might cause us distress to you in your life? And would you think that would happen, or is it something that you don't think would happen? And if so, right, like how do we prevent or at least mitigate that effect of that personal echo chamber? What do you think?
Mind if I jump
Yeah,
in?
go for it, go for it.
Yeah, so it reminds me of the social media filter bubble, right? So because we, so Anson, if I get what you're saying, it's like the confirmation bias, right? We only select what we like to hear and see, and we take that as the confirmation of our original ideology, and we only look at those. So kind of keep reinforcing, right? And
Yes,
it
yes.
reminds me of the social media filter bubble, where the algorithm just cater for your preference and keep feeding you the similar topic that you are interested of, because the algorithm knows that if you keep reading those topics, it means that you're interested in it. And if I keep feeding you with that, you keep staying in that social media platform. And then the time span will increase, and it drives user experience or engagement for the media platform, right? So from that perspective, it's good for the company, but then maybe not as good for us, right? And so when you ask about the remedies, it reminds me of Ray Dalio again, like Kevin probably will laugh. So it's about the need for radical open-mindedness, right? So when you keep open mind about other perspective and you see the perspective from other people's eyes, then you can sort of assess whether you are being too close mind, right, over certain topics. So I really recommend you to read the principles, right, the book. So rather than me just recapping what Ray said, like you can just read
Would
it
you mind
online.
recapping for me? Because I'm quite interested.
So he talks about like being radically open-minded is the best. Like it doesn't matter how talented, how knowledgeable you are. The key is to be open-minded, because there's no single person that can have all the knowledge in the world. So the key is to know your weakness, what you don't know, and at the same time learn from other people who have that knowledge. So in order to do that, you need to be open-minded. Otherwise, you are basically neglecting like other people's opinion or perspective, only looking at your own perspectives, right? So it also, it's like if you are close-minded, you have this tunnel vision. You only see what you see. And again, it's like the island of ignorance, right? We talk about with Kevin. Like the coastline of that island is what you don't know. And the sea is what you don't know. So as you learn more, the island of ignorance expands. And then you're now knowing, oh, I know more than I don't know. But at the end, the big sea is so big that there's a lot of things that you still don't know. So maybe I'm going all over the place, but
Oh
then
no, no, go for it. It's
yeah, this kind
lovely.
of the key to be open-minded, but it's easy said than done, right? So it's very difficult to keep open-mindedness all the time. Maybe I'm still not at that stage, right?
I think more or less we are all a bit close-minded. This, I mean, it would be quite ignorant for any of us to claim. Even I would apply that even for Kevin, for someone I respect a lot for his open-mindedness. But I would say it would be quite ignorant for any one of us to claim that we are open-minded, because the moment that you think that you are open-minded is probably when you actually close your mind, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that is a normal thing, but just a little bit of a follow-up question again. I feel like I'm quite interested in that. Then how do you measure the open-mindedness then? Because it's a catch-22, right? Like if you're the frog under the well and you only know the world under the well, by definition, you wouldn't know anything that is beyond the well or beyond the coastline if you can only see the island in front of you. And because of that, you would think, well, I'm so open-minded because I'm already accepting the whole world, right? That's sort of, or maybe if I put it in a more real practical sense, a close-minded person would not be able to tell if they are open-minded or not. Or more often, what happens is that I would think that I am open-minded because of how little I know. Because for if I only know free view in the world when there is 100, but I only know three, and I feel like, well, I have accept all the point of view, then I am very open-minded, right? So I'm wondering if that book that you mentioned have a solution, or do you have some personal experience on that? But the question will be, then how do you know that you are working toward open-mindedness instead of working toward a more narrow version, not narrow vision? Because there's a chance that because of, like you say, the social media bubble and everything, if you are only gathering people and knowledge and information that already agree with what you already agree with, and that would make you feels like you are accepting a lot of new point of view, but in practice it's not the case because you don't catch your own confirmation bias, which is, I would say, is a very difficult thing to catch. Then how do you know that you are working toward open-mindedness? That would be the question that I would want to throw out, if
Yeah.
anyone want to
If
pick it
I,
up.
yeah, I don't exactly recall, but
uh,
if I remember, like it's about looking at the cause and effect of events that happen to you. So it talks about like Ray's always talk about like everything has a cause and effect. So there's a reason behind, and if you have those input, then it's going to create those output. So it's the law of nature, like a machine, right? So I remember vaguely like he talks about like if you have events that are not good, so you objectively look at those events, analyze what are the cause of that, and in that process, you're basically trying to be open-mindedness and to look at different causes that contribute to that outcome that you don't like. And if you can understand the cause of that outcome and try to figure that out and to do something with it, then you are actually being open-minded, right? At the same time, because you have to be able to lift yourself at a higher level, like look at the big picture to analyze what caused those outcomes. But if you are too
mm,
up close to that particular problem, like you are just basically bury yourself into the outcome rather than look further back or at a high level, then I guess that would differentiate whether we are closed-minded or open-minded, right?
so whether you are able to see past your own excuse, I suppose, of failure, so there must be an event then, I suppose, and you have to
Yeah.
judge whether that event, what is the causation of that event, and you have to try to have a more holistic view of the causation so that you can see things that you haven't seen before. And that by definition, I suppose, is open-mindedness, because you are accepting a course that is not existent, non-existent in your previous point of view. Did I understand that correctly?
Probably. I
Actually,
can't
or
be
maybe I'm making
exactly
it more
sure, but I
complicated.
probably need to go back to the book again
No,
and
man,
read again.
it's just me.
Yeah,
I'm curious because I'm always
yeah,
worried about open-mindedness. Is to be frank,
yeah.
like because I am living a lifestyle. If you don't know, I don't know if Kevin told you, but I'm living a lifestyle that is kind of like hermits. Really, I only interact with my students and my girlfriend and you guys. Like I literally, if I count friends within the five fingers, I only have five friends really, and I enjoy it because I don't like interacting with a lot of people. Uh, but at the same time, I think one of the cause of this lifestyle, right, is always the worry that what if because of how small my friend group is, albeit all my friends are quite different in personality, what if this is a very small echo chamber that I have created for myself? And because of that, and because of that, now I feel I already see some of the effect where because I don't need to really meet new people anymore, and compared to when I was in a company before, I don't have a drive to learn new things or even see things a new way, right? Because I don't need to. I already have a bunch of people that more or less agree with me. And that's why I'm always worried that, oh, wow, this is gonna go south very soon because it seems like I have by embracing what I want as as an introvert, which I don't know why no one believed me, but I still identified myself as an introvert. Um, but by embracing this lifestyle, I accidentally created that small island that I'm worried that I'm gonna be trapped in. So that's why I'm asking a lot of questions on open-mindedness and learning because I think I have a desire myself to grow, to be a more holistic person, but it always seems hard, right? Like, is it enough to just accept new opinion? Like right now, I think one of the meaning for me this of this podcast is because I'm doing this podcast, I'm sort of forced to, not forced in a bad way. I'm driven to do more research and look at different podcasts, and because of that, I already have a new stream of events. But other than this podcast, it seems like there's no new intake of new information for me to make sure that I stay open-minded. Which actually brings me to a question: is that really that important too? Now I'm at a stage where I'm questioning: am I worrying too much by always worrying whether I'm going to be open-minded? Because to what end do I need to stay open-minded, right? It's quite a lot of effort. You think about it, because you have to always break your own perception. You always have to learn new things. You feel uncomfortable. You always drag yourself out of the comfort zone, and that by definition you will not be comfortable. But I think, is it really that, because we hope in one day life, as at least the YouTube algorithm thinks that I am that kind of person, they always talk about, I always see video that's talk about dragging yourself out of comfort zone is most important, challenging yourself is the most important, growing is the most important, and open-mindedness being one of the factor of growth, right? But now I'm question. But then after not living in that business world anymore, and I start to question myself: like, is growth that important? Like I understand growth to make yourself feel good is important, so that you feel like life is purposeful. That I get. But to what end do I need to do that? Right. And I'm wondering, what do you guys think? Because like for me, just let me just express a bit myself again. Sorry for taking the mic for too long. Um, like Kevin look at me, be like, yeah, you don't have to worry about the length, right? And
But
um,
it can tell us that like Kevin is very eager
I was
to
saying that, so
speak. Like
I was like, sorry,
No,
he's been
wait a
waiting for
bit,
so long.
wait a
no,
bit.
no. You really don't have to worry about the length.
I know,
We control the length, right?
Of course, yeah, true. Oh, but because I myself, I found that currently my growth rate is very slow in the sense that I maybe have some new things that happen every 3 months per se. And usually it comes because something else happened in the world and I want to get onto the trend, right? Or maybe I'm bored, then I will drive myself to go out. But I don't learn a lot. I for example, I joined a boxing gym recently because of Kevin's like encouragement. Well, actually, I'm MMA gym, but and then I start to learn how to box and do Muay Thai and also do BJJ. Uh, and that is fun, right? But I don't feel I'm not there to like, oh, train every day, like, Rocky music playing in the background, run run 10 miles a day. I'm not having that drive, but I still feel very comfortable because yeah, I'm already learning new things. I'm fighting in a level that I never fight before, even though it's still quite low at a level. But because of that little improvement, I already feel quite a lot of satisfaction in life because of this small learning. Now that we're doing this podcast, is small, but I'm enjoying it. It's new things. Pretty sure 3 months later there will be some small new things I'm gonna do that will not contribute to our overall growth, or maybe it will contribute in a way that I don't understand. And that's why I have the question. So for you guys, like, how much growth is needed for you to feel satisfied in life? Because it seems for me, I think I need very small, and I think maybe there are a lot of people like me too. I hope there are. I hope I'm not a freak in that way. So anyway, like, that's the question. I'll throw the mic out.
I
Kevin
I
be
want to
like,
just
finally.
respond to
Anyway,
the previous questions.
go
A
for
couple
it.
of points about openness. Um, when you when you learn about an event, or when you go back to history and you read about an event, how do you minimize your bias? I would say one of the ways you could do it is don't think about the event in the frame of mind of right or wrong or good or bad. See the event for what it is, however disgusting, bloody, or whatever. Don't use any other word that is emotive to describe the event except to describe the event as they are. Okay? So just remove emotion from the observation. And then ask yourself, if I was in that person's position, what could be the reason I would be doing this? And if I was in this person's position, what would be the reason I would be doing that? And what you're trying to do is understand the behavioral context of the event, how people make decisions. So when you remove yourself being the judge of the moral standards of events, okay, you stop letting that guide you being on one side or the other side. So if you go onto the safari and you witness on the plains of Africa a lion chasing after a buffalo, two events. A lion kills a buffalo, or a lion did not kill the buffalo and the lion cub dies because of no food. Who's right? Who's cruel? Well, it depends on who you are. Are you the lion or are you the buffalo? And the world is full of those situational, role-based events where in the position that you are, you may think this is a good event for you, and you switch over to the other side, not so good. Conflict exists. Confrontation exists. Okay? Who's right? Depends on who you ask. And who makes that person more right than the other just because it happens to be in that position, right? I'm not saying I can take this stand and there is absolutely no right or wrong for every single event. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when you look at the event, first, don't use the right, wrong, good, bad to look at it first. Look at it first without that. If later on you want to then relook at the event using that lens, feel free to do so. But don't mix them together and form one collective view and the only view on that. Okay. Now it's quite hard because, let's say you find it very difficult to be in the position of the lion cub looking at the event, or you find it very difficult to consider being the lion and think that this is good, right? But this is precisely where bias comes from. Our inability to stand in the shoe of the other side and see the event from another perspective. And that's what creates bias. I think in the last podcast, Anson, when we did, I gave you the example of if I drive a car and I stop in front of you, right? And you thought that I was just someone rude because you didn't understand what is happening in the car. But if you then found out the car that I had my wife who just broke water and I'm trying to get her to the hospital, you would react completely differently. So are we able to, in all circumstances in history, step in the shoes of the person at that time with the information that he or she has to make that decision, taking the responsibility of the person at the time, whatever the responsibility is, and consider in collective terms, how would I make this decision if I was that person? Would I be able to make a better decision than that person? A more appropriate, or the least bad out of the bad bunch, right? Now, it may not be possible at all because there's a lot of information that is not open. They're not public. So when those situations happen, I would hold back with a benefit of the doubt. I don't know. I have to say, I don't know. This is a protection for bias. You don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. Nobody but that person, and sometimes even that person doesn't know things that they don't know. So that's number one. Number two, how do you know you are heading in the right direction of openness? I would say one of the better habit would be, instead of phrasing your observation as a conclusion, phrase your observation as a question. So you're always seeking another perspective when you have a conversation with somebody else. Instead of saying that, well, I think this is bad, I think that's right. You say, well, what do you think about that? Because you already have a stance. So whatever you have, you already have. There's no need to reaffirm what you have. But what might be contributing to a newer angle of discovery is to hear someone else's what they think of it. Understanding does not require agreement. You can understand, and after you understood, you disagree. It's perfectly okay. Happens all the time. My son understands he had to go to school. He doesn't agree that he needs to go to school. Perfectly fair. I don't agree either. I mean, you ask Francis. I don't agree with school at all. I'm not an anarchist, but I'm just saying there are better ways to do it, and we can, talk about it in a later podcast. But so that kind of mindset is, I think, helpful because it gets rid of your unnecessary emotional attachment to a fixed point of view. It allows you to create a habit of asking someone a very simple question. So what do you think about that? It's a very open question. What do you think about it? Nothing specific about it. And I'll let that person say whatever that comes to mind. And I'll just take a reference point. Oh, someone in this world thinks like that. Well, what does that mean? It means this person represents 1 out of 7.8 billion people and 1 out of 7.8 slices of opinion, which makes up the collective truth of the world, looking at that event. Every single slice counts. We don't have all of them, but the more we get exposed to, the more we're able to see a 3D shape of that opinion. Again, you don't have to agree with it, but you're seeing a much complete, truer shape than if you disregard them. You have to understand that such a thing exists. You have to acknowledge its existence and stay with it. Accept it without agreeing. And that is a helpful pathway towards getting rid of the bias or keeping open-mindedness. And then to your point about how much open-mindedness do you need, how much growth do you need, I think that's a somewhat personal measure of how much is enough for you, personally. And I think we talked about in previous podcasts, balance. Balance is something that you decide, right? And when balance is kind of roughly there, you feel completely nothing. You feel that you're at ease, which is nothing. You're not excited. You're not sad. You're not, frustrated. You're not disappointed. You're just okay. You are at peace just sitting down here doing nothing. You don't feel bored. And so when you have this unusual feeling of nothingness, quite contrary to the thought, in my humble opinion, that is very close to what we call homeostasis, okay, the balance. Because when you think about balance is what? When you found a pivotal point to support something and it stays balanced and they don't move at that moment in time. That's balance. But life do not have such a thing as a fixed point of balance because everything changes all the time. The best we can hope for is find a way to seek continuously a dynamic balance. Oh, something's changed, maybe I should move to the left a little bit. Or something has changed, maybe I should move forward a little bit, okay? And try to find it and feel your way around it, okay? And so, but when you were saying, you only have a few friends, you only do something new, I think maybe you're underestimating the time that you're on your own when you're browsing YouTube, when you're maybe reading a book, maybe having a random conversation with someone. Maybe you're underestimating the source of growth from those activities. Not necessarily you have to do something completely novel physically to create growth. I mean, I can grow after this conversation and I go back to my seat and just close my eyes and rethink about this and reconnect some of the dots. And to me, I would call that growth. Why wouldn't I? If I learn as a result of today's conversation, it triggers a new angle of connection that, oh my God, yeah, that could apply to that too. That is so true. And then boom, to me, that's growth. And I'll be very, very happy with that. People don't know why I'm happy. They couldn't possibly know. I couldn't explain to them. I mean, they're not in my brain. So I would just smile and my wife wondered, what are you smiling about? I said, don't worry about it.
Sounds like the end scene of the Joker movie.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think, the point is, I think you will know when you're stale. And when you're stale and you do have a desire to learn and to grow, you would exhibit those actions. For example, you reach out to someone actively and say, hey, can we have a chat? Or you would go out purposely to do something. I think the actions speak for itself. And if you don't, you might say that you need growth, but you don't need it bad enough to actually action on it. And therefore, not until such a time. So focus on the action, not, thinking about what action you might take, but look at what you've done, what you're doing, and just on that alone is an exercise in open-mindedness. Can you, being yourself, self-evaluate without a bias? What am I actually doing? Am I learning some things? Why do I not call this learning? Why do I, look at this event and minimize this event instead of actually calling for what it is, for the holistic result of what it could be? Because when I say, I sit down and I think about this, you guys both nodded, right? Obviously you think, oh yeah, that's right. Well, maybe that's a new piece of learning as it is already, right? And how's that not learning? How's that not growing, right? And I think, the other thing, and I'll start off with this, watching grass grow is a very painful exercise. It grows very slow, at least not notably so. But if you watch a blade of grass today, and then you watch it 5 days later, you need to get a lawnmower out. All of a sudden becomes this. But if you were just watching it all the time, it's like, oh, when are you going to grow? When are you going to grow? Right? So um, maybe ask that question once in a while. Maybe don't ask that question every day. And it doesn't create that level of anxiety as am I growing? How much am I growing? Let it happen. Yeah, let time do its work. Yeah.
Like, there's something that worked for me, like, is to measure the progress a little bit. Like, I still do think I don't measure enough, but there's a trick that I use every year is that I have a gratitude box that is a glass jar. And then sometimes when something good happens or whatever, I just want to record that because I don't write diary. Like writing is very painful to me. So I'll just have a small note card. I'll write down a small sentence or two, and then I'll put it with the date into the glass jar. And then every year at the first day of the year, I take out that jar of box and then I pour it all over. And then I read every single note card over that past year. And then there are a lot of things that I forgot. Like, and then reading those reminds me of the past progress over the year. And then it helps in that day, like just in that day, like the next day I already forgot all everything and then it starts again. But it helps to basically put things in context, like looking back over the past year, what I have achieved, like what I have done. At least it helped a little bit. And the very action of writing the things down and put it into the jar helps me and to basically like reminds me, like looking at the jar, right? It's filling up every day, every month. And at least I know I'm doing something, right? So I guess it's also down to the two self, right? There's the experiencing self and the remembering self. So for the experiencing self, maybe we are looking at learning and growth rather painfully, right? Because we don't see that change because it's not exponential growth, right? Usually in life, not like learning to do something that are relatively hard skills, right? So, but if we look back like over the years for the remembering self, at least for me, I see that well actually I have done quite a lot. Like I've come like not very far, but at least a bit distance, right? So that helps to put things in perspective. But I guess Anson, back to your point about growth, I guess you are lacking some sense of urgency in yourself and you see that, oh, do I need to act for growth because you are maybe having a plateau, just like last year around in April, right? I had a chat with Kevin asking about like learning plateau in the workplace. Like I feel like, oh, I have reached a plateau, like I'm not learning a lot, so how do I break through that? And Kevin talked about, oh well, actually you in that moment you're actually learning a lot, right? Because you are looking at yourself and then you can see what you can do. And for the things that you have done, have you done the best possible? So just long story short, recapping like 1 year ago. And then yeah, there are a lot of things I guess that back to the point about being personal, right? It's only you can answer, like because we don't know what you're thinking and we haven't experienced what you have experienced, right? So I guess you can take perspective from other people, but at the end of the day, I think you have to answer yourself already. It's just like the confirmation bias. You just want someone to confirm that you think what you're thinking is correct.
Well, that is true. I mean, to be frank, the question is more about I'm wondering what you guys are doing for growth rather than actually asking for an answer. Because the truth is like what Kevin say. I personally, especially after choosing this lifestyle, I have a very strong sense of clarity in the sense that I know this is the level or speed of life, if there is such thing, that I want to go at. So it is for me every now and then new things that I can learn, every now and then new perspective that I can see, I can take. Every now and then a book that I can read, new events that happens. And when things happen in life, I don't reject them. I go with the flow and see where it takes me and see how much growth I can extract from it. Try to be not as non-biased as possible. That's sort of the comfortable speed that I have, right? So that's that. But and one of the things that I found most useful and when I'm embracing the speed of life is that to ask questions or as is to take perspective from other people because I personally I think I learned a lot from Alex, my girlfriend. She have a very different pace of life compared to me because she's always rushing forward. And I feel like I'm like, oh, I'm looking at her. I was like, oh, why would you do that? And because I think that, oh, why would you do that? And I started to learn new things about myself too. Oh, maybe I have this emotion, or maybe I can learn about gratitude, or maybe I can do a podcast. This whole podcast idea actually stems from helping her with her channels and everything. So I find it the most useful to for myself, like to grow by um, learning about other people's perspective of how they do it. Essentially, I'm a copycat. I just like to copy people's like strategy. Well, and that's what innovation is, right? A bunch of if you copy enough of good things and you mix them together into a new lifestyle that you yourself enjoy, and maybe that will hopefully finally, or maybe I'm already at, who knows, who cares, I suppose, that or maybe I'll reach a point that like what Kevin say, a lifestyle that is tailored to me, that only I get to enjoy because of how I have choose to manu actually no create it. I don't want to use the word manufacture. Um, how I choose to create them. So yes, I do agree. It is a personal learning. It is a value thing. It is different. Therefore, I will drag on a little bit if you don't mind me. That I'm wondering like how I still wonder like how you guys would grow. Like because Kevin, like from my perspective, right? I mean, Kevin seems to be able to see from grasses and trees and dolphins and somehow extract a lesson from there, which is a skill that I still want to master, but I still learning. But I'm always curious about like your perspective, because it is something that I wonder if I can do one day, which is be so insightful that I can look at something and use that to reflect upon my life. That I think what an amazing experience it must be to be enlightened by such simple everyday physical object. That will be one of the things that I'm curious about, right? So I see how Kevin grow and I will ask, well, how do you do that? How do you look at that and do it? And I see Francis. I mean, I haven't really talked that many times with you yet, but I think I feel that there is sort of a drive. I feel like you have read a lot of books. I feel like there's a drive to find new knowledge, learn from like famous people, perhaps quotes, and you have a different gratitude jar. That thing is that method is seems to be quite a systematic approach, right? So it seems to learn very systematically. You have a very purposed route, and I'm wondering that about that too. Is how do you do that? Like gratitude jar is obviously one of the good one. How else then? Like, do you read books? Do you from friends, or do you learn from your classes that you have with everything? I'm just that's what I'm wondering, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that we're off topic or anything. I'm just still curious about it and trying to satisfy my own curiosity, if you don't mind. And it's
Yeah,
that there I will throw my mic out, right?
it's a natural progression of the topic, right? So back to your point about copying, like I also copy that, like the gratitude jar from someone I watch on YouTube, and then I thought, oh, like it doesn't take a lot of effort, right? So why not try it? And then I think I started in 2018, so this is the fourth year. It's not going to take a lot of effort. It's just, and sometimes I even forgot to to write down the little memo. And I think, okay, fine, it's okay, because at the end, it's just for myself, right? I'm not doing it for other people. So I don't have to feel the pressure to do something. So if I don't feel like it, then it's okay. I try not to burden myself too much about doing that, because it's supposed to be a positive thing, right? Gratitude is positive. But if I get too stressed over that, then it becomes a negative source, right? So I just take it easy. And then, like you mentioned, like I'm quite systematic in learning, but I think I'm probably too systematic, and then over the balance of keep reading, because sometimes I talk to Kevin, right? Well, I'm reading too much, like, and actually not doing a lot. So that is also a problem, right? Because I keep reading one book after another book, and then I look back, well, what have I done other than reading? So it's like I'm collecting a lot of pieces of puzzle, but then I haven't started putting them together yet. So that is also a part of problem that I'm now facing, and it feels like there are a bit like it's too many puzzle now. Like I feel a bit overwhelmed. I don't know how to start. Like I don't know where to start as well. So that is another problem, right? And then I guess the learning, it comes down to your personal motivation, right? Or the drive. So back to the point about the train analogy. So is that you have a destination in mind, then you will do something about it, right? But if you don't have a destination in mind, then you start rendering, right? Maybe I'm not saying as good or wrong, or like correct or not correct. It's just a different approach, right? So it's like if you go traveling, sometimes you have a planned, detailed itinerary. That you want to go, okay, in the morning this day I'll go to a shopping mall, then in the afternoon go to a museum. Versus sometimes you just want to have a walk in the city, wander around, see what happens to you or in the city, right? So it's just different approach. For me personally, I do have some sort of destination in mind, but then getting there is a bit far. Not yet, and I still don't see the path, right? So I think the other day I talked to Kevin about setting goal. Like if you have a goal that is so clear and you know how to achieve it, chances are it's too small. Like you should set a bigger goal. And then for me, I do have a goal that is kind of big, but I still don't see the path to that. So I guess that's another point, right? You become a bit at a loss sometimes because you don't know where to start and where to approach that. So there's different path with different problems.
Too big is obviously a big problem too. Like if you
Yeah,
when you set it so big that the general direction is even lost, even you don't even have a general direction, that would be quite a
yeah,
difficult one. But then, like me, when I suppose there are people that wouldn't like the way I do it, which is fine because they're they. I'm me, but there is maybe their difficulty is that setting it too small too because it achieved too easily. And so and Kevin, you wanted to grab the mic, I see.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe just supplement something that Francis has said. Um, so when you mentioned about me observing nature, how did I come to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's just come naturally. Um, I think all of us are inherently interested in some things. Um, so maybe for you, let's say video games, or boxing, or whatever that may be. And the first thing is you don't look down on those things as less irrelevant than anything else in the world. Anything has its place in the universe for a reason. That's how I start in terms of, looking at, well, a blade of grass. Very humble. A little bit, nobody cares about a blade of grass. But does actually anyone understand the construction of the grass, how it grows, how it draws, energy from the sun, and how the root system developed? Do they know? Do they know how much force the root of the grass can take as a structure? Have they ever thought about it?
Mm.
Now, for those people who do not find that interesting, would just look at me with a very like confused look and say, why would
I
anybody
don't.
wants to, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I look at that look and I then feel small myself, I will never develop a desire to want to understand. And I will never be awed by what I found out. And I will never extract the essence and abstract that to say to somebody, well, you look at a piece of grass and it's so humble, but you know what they can do? They have this superpower. And then all of a sudden, you find that, oh, I'm very insightful. Actually, you have the same insight about the things that you care about. If I talk to you about boxing, and if I ask the right question, I think I can tease out those things that you spend a lot of time thinking about that nobody else thought about in relation to boxing, in relation to positioning, in relation to strategy, in relation to tactics. And then if I lead you and guide you, well, how would you apply those things in life? Eventually, I think you would find a way to express it and frame it in a way that makes sense.
Mm.
And you similarly have the same level of so-called insight. So part
Mm.
of that maybe is just learning how to express it in a way that you connect to the real life.
That's fair.
I think that's probably a more relevant question and angle to look at that rather than the fact that you don't have it. I think you do have
It's just on a
it.
different object or subject.
Right.
Mm.
And we don't, look at it as a worthy subject to explore. Okay? We
I
don't.
mean, yeah, it's face. Oh.
Right? And I say, please reserve the judgment that you shouldn't. Anything that you spend a reasonable amount of time in thinking about, doing, or observing is a time investment. You'd want to extract the return on any investment you make, wouldn't you?
Mm. Well, yeah.
Time you spend, you think wasting, as long as you enjoy it, is not wasted.
Mm.
So you think back, and I'll go back to what Francis was saying when he came to me with a question saying, I'm on a learning plateau. Okay, have you extracted everything from what you've learned before? You thought you've learned how to do this, how to do that. Okay, well, that's learning. Well, what about a level deeper than that? What about in the learning process? What have you learned about yourself? If you do know that now, how would you handle future learning to make it more efficient? If this is what you know about yourself, about your preferences, about your reaction to certain things. I was talking to him about, Francis, about the way I would look at, let's say, YouTube channel. Why would I look at certain YouTube channel and not others? What are my criteria? Well, I find that the personality itself is extremely important. So there are similar contents delivered by many people. Why do I choose that channel? It's not because of necessarily superior in content, but maybe because the way the person speaks, the style, the voice, the tone, the attitude, the look, the lighting, the music. Okay, it's a combination of things that makes me feel engaged. Now, that's a matter of personal taste. So, learning your own personal taste in itself is a learning. So that I know what to look for that would increase my motivation to learn. And if I look at something like that, my retention rate goes way up, my attention goes way up, and what I can capture from that fixed amount of investment, I retain a higher percentage. Which means as I look back behind and connect the dot, I have more dots I can readily connect because I remember them. So these are very subtle things, but I love talking about them because these are the things that once you realize, you can start noticing yourself and create those ideal condition for you to actually enjoy learning. See, I think it's so important that you enjoy learning and don't look at it as a chore. It's not a responsibility. You don't have to do it. No one is saying that it's illegal not to learn. You don't have to learn. But I would hope that you'd want to learn because you enjoy it. Because that's the only way you can sustain it.
I would say you can actually. I would like supplement that a bit too
Yeah.
because I feel like there is also this fact that it's almost impossible to not learn. if we define learning as reflecting on experience and gaining insight via the experience, then as long as you're living, and let's assume that we all have this mechanism of boredom, and when we are bored, we tends to do something to try to be not bored, and because of that something that would happen, it's sort of you sort of always force yourself into more or less a new or at least an experience, and that experience always leads to a learning anyway. So it's almost impossible for you to not learn as long as you're breathing and living, right? And the boredom mechanism is intact. So that would be what I want to say on that. And I think on the topic on withholding judgment on what to learn, I think that is actually quite I resonated a little bit because I think I everyone sort of have this. I don't know if everyone have it actually. I haven't you have it. I think, um, but I everyone seems to have this like weird fascination, and weird is not judgment here. It's just not as normal in this case. Um, for example, I recently got into farming for no reason. Well, actually, because I watched Clarkson's Farm. If I don't know if you guys like seen the series.
I watched it.
Oh, yay! There you go.
Yeah.
And
What was that? Which constant farming?
Clarkson. So Jeremy Clarkson
Clarkson.
from Top
Oh,
Gear.
really?
Yeah, he made a farming show,
Oh, really?
literally
I didn't
about
know
farming.
that.
Oh,
Oh,
dude,
wow.
you want to see it? I don't know
No,
if
I
you would
want to
like
see
it,
it.
but yeah,
I
it,
like him. He's a
yeah,
very funny guy.
it's very funny guy. I like that carefree style that he have, but and I thought it would be another Top Gear show, right? When I watched Clarkson's Farm, I love
Right.
it, judge a little bit because of Jeremy Clarkson. I mean,
Yeah.
he's known to mess around,
Yeah.
So, but then he is actually quite serious in the series in terms of learning how to farm, even though there's a lot of mishap because of he didn't know, and he sort of go through the whole process of farming from how modern day farming, how do you actually need to learn so much engineering that in order to farm, right? The amount of skill set that you have to learn is enormous. You need to know how to fix a tractor, drive a tractor. You need to be a biologist, know when to plant, how to plant, what to plant, on what soil to plant. And then the farm animals, you need to take care of them, herd them. So you need to be a shepherd, and then you need to be a vet to, and then you need to be a nurse when they deliver baby, and then you need to be a businessman, right? The amount of hats that you need to put on in order to farm and produce food, it is. I mean, he did a very good job in actually um, delivering that sort of difficulty of modern day farming to us, and I got instantly dragged into it, and now I'm watching all the farming show. At least I learned all about farming, or even considering. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever think about it, but maybe one day, like when you're older, you might want to become a farmer. Like 退隱 or something like that.
I would
Yeah.
definitely be up for it.
Oh yeah, you and I,
But
let's go farm.
yeah, but here's a point that is very evident of what I've just said.
Mm,
When you look at Clarkson, and you know of him, and you like his style. Now everybody knows that Clarkson only talk about cars,
well,
but
he's known
because
for
of the
that. Yeah.
right, but because of the personality, you're dragged into him talking something else. Not because necessarily something else draws you in, but he draws you in
Mm,
because you know what you can expect from the style, and you're gonna be engaged and entertained by the style. See, when you're learning, once you found the kind of thing that excites you and you go towards that, anything he say is going to become interesting for you,
fair. That's fair.
right?
If you like the person, you sort of learn because of
Yes.
the person instead of like the
Yes.
topic itself.
Yes. That's why influence is important, right?
That's
That's why
it's,
relationship is important.
mm.
You actually
But
have a relationship with him, he just doesn't know it.
Well, you like him, so it's a
Yeah.
single side. Uh,
Yeah.
I think that is actually quite insightful too, because it's very similar to how I'm gonna bring Alex to the table again. How her relationship with food, it's like she used to not like a lot of food. This is not tasty. That is bad, right? But then now, because I know a little bit more about eating, I also drag her around to different restaurant, or I will cook sometimes to on a different style of cooking. And because of that, now she is sort of had developed this habit of appreciating food because of me. I would take credit for that because she would say that, and that's very similar to how the relationship me and Clarkson have, I suppose, where because you like the person, or because I suppose you engage with the person, you don't even have to like it, so long as you engage with them. Because of the relationship, you naturally get dragged around, and so long as you have friends that would drag you around like that, maybe learning is still inevitable, and that's the best part. That's for me, maybe the best kind of learning, because it feels natural. It feels like life is happening to you and you embracing it, and that for me is the way, maybe perhaps the most relaxed way to actually learn, because it's, well, effortless, really. You are not trying to force yourself into getting some sort of knowledge. There's no stress that come behind it. But of course, I will be fair. Learning with stress is also sometimes good because it does promote efficiency. That is also still true. It's just there's the enjoyable type of learning and there is the efficient type of learning. Sometimes it can be both.
This is a beautiful way to take a quick break and then do a download of the video.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you can
definitely.
get a 3-hour version of that. Right? And then
thanks for making my job easier. Yes.
Yeah. And then
I will cut it
we can,
up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we can all come back after a little break.